Have you ever truly observed, perhaps in a quiet moment of reflection, how a select few individuals wield what appears to be an almost mystical, supernatural mastery over the very atmosphere surrounding them? And they achieve this astonishing effect without ever raising their voice, without issuing a single command, without begging or pleading or demanding. They simply withdraw. They pull back with calm, deliberate intention. And in that precise instant of their retreat, everything around them begins to shift dramatically. The invisible energy in the room changes its frequency. People who moments before felt secure and in control suddenly find themselves unsettled, questioning their assumptions, chasing after some lost sense of connection, feeling an unexpected wave of emotion rise within them: curiosity, anxiety, longing, even fear. Now stop for a second and imagine applying this same principle to your own life. Imagine choosing, consciously and powerfully, to do exactly the same thing. What if you stopped leaping into every emotional fray with an immediate, automatic reaction? What if, instead of firing back words or defenses or explanations the moment someone pushes your buttons, you selected silence, pure, intentional, unapologetic silence? What if retreat became your chosen response rather than explosion, argument, or people-pleasing? What, in your deepest intuition, do you sense would actually happen in your relationships, in your inner world, in the way others now perceive and treat you? That, right there, is the hidden point of power waiting to be claimed. The moment you deliberately stop being endlessly, unconditionally available, emotionally open at all hours, physically present whenever summoned, psychologically accessible for every demand or drama, the entire ecosystem built around you begins to tremble and enter a visible state of crisis. Why? Because the people in your orbit have grown entirely accustomed to steering and manipulating you through the predictability of your reactions, through the reliability of your impulses, through the certainty that you will always show up, always respond, always give something of yourself. They have counted on your availability as a constant in their lives. But the very day you make the sovereign choice to withdraw, not out of anger or pettiness, but from a place of awakened self-respect, the whole unspoken game reverses itself overnight. Suddenly, those who believed they had you completely figured out, who thought they knew every lever to pull, are forced to confront a startling, uncomfortable truth. They actually know virtually nothing about the real you beneath the mask of constant accessibility. Carl Jung once profoundly stated, "Everything that irritates us about others can lead us to a better understanding of ourselves." Pause and let that sink in deeper than before. When you deliberately become inaccessible, elusive, no longer an open book for anyone to read at will, who is the one who truly begins to spiral into desperation? Who grows visibly irritated, restless, even frantic? Who starts poking, prodding, provoking your old wounds specifically to provoke any kind of emotional reaction, any flicker of the old predictable response from you? Make no mistake, every one of those frantic attempts reveals infinitely more about their own inner emptiness, their dependencies, their hidden manipulations, than it ever reveals about your character. It shines a merciless light on just how deeply and subtly you have been controlled for so long. Without you even fully realizing the extent of the strings attached, you have spent years, perhaps decades, habitually giving pieces of yourself away, to keep the peace, to avoid conflict, to prevent the unbearable pain of losing people who, if we're brutally honest, were never truly aligned with you or invested in your well-being at any deep level. With every forced yes when your entire being screamed no, with every instant reply to messages that drained you, with every emotional outburst given in service of someone else's comfort, you handed over precious fragments of your life force, your psychic vitality. And when the day ends and you lie in the dark staring at the ceiling, what is left inside you? A bone-deep tiredness that sleep cannot cure, a simmering frustration that has no clear target, an inexplicable emptiness that gnaws at your core and leaves you wondering where all your energy disappeared to. But now I will tell you the unvarnished reason, because you have made yourself far too available, far too cheaply and freely accessible to individuals who do not deserve even a single minute of your sacred silence, let alone hours or days of your presence. This entire message is not, and I emphasize this strongly, not about coldly turning your back on the entire world, shutting everyone out in bitterness or cynicism. No, it is about something far more courageous and sacred. It is about finally choosing yourself, without apology. It is about stepping fully into what Carl Jung so powerfully described as individuation, the lifelong, sometimes painful, always liberating process of becoming whole, authentic, undivided, and complete in your own essence. And that sacred process truly begins the moment you internalize and embody this one revolutionary truth. Silence, when chosen consciously, carries far more transformative power than 1,000 heated arguments, explanations, or justifications ever could. Withdrawal, when it springs from deep self-awareness rather than fear-driven escape or passive avoidance, is not weakness. It is one of the purest expressions of authentic personal power available to any human being. So right now, I look directly into your eyes through these words and ask you with unflinching honesty, how much longer are you willing to allow the swirling emotions, needs, dramas, and expectations of other people to continue dictating the rhythm and direction of your inner life? How much longer will you permit yourself to react like a puppet on invisible strings every single time someone deliberately or carelessly pokes at your oldest, most tender wounds? Isn't it perhaps, finally, time to reach down, locate those strings, and cut them one by one with calm resolve? Isn't it time to step back, to withdraw your constant energetic offering, to allow yourself to become something of a living mystery once again? Because make no mistake, the instant you cease being endlessly available in every way, the entire landscape of your relationships, your self-perception, and the way the world responds to you begins to change irreversibly, for the better, from the earliest moments of childhood. Almost every cultural message you absorbed taught you one overriding lesson: you must always be present, always respond quickly, always please others, always say yes, even when every fiber of your being yearns to say no with conviction. Society conditioned you, systematically, relentlessly, to believe that your fundamental worth as a person is directly proportional to how available, how accommodating, how endlessly giving you can manage to be toward everyone around you. But here is a truth delivered with rare, unflinching clarity that perhaps no one has ever placed before you so directly. This chronic, compulsive over-availability is not a beautiful virtue to be proud of. It is a cleverly disguised prison that has quietly robbed you of your sovereignty for far too long. And as long as you continue clinging to the deeply ingrained belief that you must remain accessible, emotionally, physically, psychologically, at all times and for all people, you will remain wide open to manipulation, to energetic depletion, and to being casually discarded the very moment you cease being immediately useful or convenient to someone else's needs. Do you understand precisely why this happens? Because constant, unconditional availability automatically renders you predictable, and anything, or anyone, that becomes utterly predictable in behavior and response inevitably transforms into a tool, an instrument, a means to an end for others. People begin to treat you exactly like an emotional emergency button mounted on their wall. They press it whenever they crave attention, relief from their own discomfort, validation of their feelings, a quick distraction from their inner void. And then, once satisfied, they casually place you back on the shelf until the next crisis arises. And the cruelest irony, you have remained blind to this dynamic for so long because you were trapped inside a comforting, but completely false illusion. The belief that if you were always present for everyone else, surely, eventually, someone would be present for you in the same selfless way. But life, unfortunately, does not operate according to that hopeful equation. Carl Jung spoke with great insight about the persona, the carefully constructed, social mask we all wear, in order to be accepted, loved, approved of, and recognized by the collective. And it is precisely this persona, this polished facade, that has kept you locked in patterns of chronic over-availability for years. You say it's okay, and force a smile while suffocating internally. You respond to messages within seconds, even when your body and mind are screaming for rest. You explain yourself endlessly, justify every boundary you attempt to set, defend your right to exist as though you owe the entire world a detailed accounting of your choices. But the deeper, more painful truth is this: the more completely you place yourself at the very center of other people's stages, dramas, and emotional needs, the more completely you disappear from the center of your own life story. Being available at all times, for all reasons, to all people, is actually one of the most subtle yet devastating forms of self-abandonment. It is a disguised, socially acceptable method of constantly seeking external approval, desperately dodging the terror of rejection, and attempting to micromanage the image others hold of you. Yet every moment spent in that exhausting pursuit comes with an enormous hidden price tag: the gradual but relentless erosion of your inner peace. Your vital life energy, finite, precious, irreplaceable, is scattered outward as though it were infinite and inexhaustible, when in reality it is limited, very limited, and desperately needs protection. The individuals who insist upon your perpetual availability, who become agitated the moment you pull back even slightly, do not actually want you, the full, complex, sovereign human being that you are. What they truly want, what they crave and depend upon, is the specific set of emotional services you provide so reliably: validation of their feelings, companionship to ward off their loneliness, distraction from their own unresolved pain, a steady source of comfort on demand. But the moment you change the rules, when you begin setting real boundaries, when you refuse to react on cue, when you choose your own peace over their convenience, those same people often grow irritated, accusatory, bewildered. They call you weird, distant, changed, selfish, not because you have done something wrong, not because your new behavior is inherently flawed, but simply because you have stopped being a reliably functional tool in their emotional ecosystem. And here, we arrive at one of the cruelest truths of human dynamics: the more freely and abundantly you make yourself available, the less genuine value, respect, and reverence others tend to assign to you, because anything, or anyone, that exists in endless supply quickly becomes taken for granted, devalued, treated like an emotional rag to be used and discarded. No one deeply respects what they never have to earn through effort, pati, ence, or mutual investment. No one truly values what is always guaranteed to be there, waiting. So right now, I invite you to pause, really pause, and ask yourself these piercing questions with complete honesty. Who in your life actually, genuinely deserves the gift of your time, your focused attention, your deep listening, your emotional presence? And perhaps even more importantly, who deserves, and perhaps even requires, your deliberate, conscious absence in order for healthier dynamics to emerge? But before you can answer either of those questions with clarity, we must first dig deeper into one essential, foundational matter. Why do we react so compulsively, so automatically, so predictably? Why do we give in so easily to provocations, demands, guilt trips? What invisible force lies behind this near-reflexive desire to respond instantly, to justify ourselves, to please at any cost? The answer lies in what Carl Jung so brilliantly identified and named as psychic energy, the vital living current that powers your entire inner world. And that, my friend, is exactly what we are going to explore next in full depth. Because your psychic energy is, quite literally, the only true thing you possess in this life that cannot be taken from you unless you allow it. If you never learn how to recognize it, guard it, and direct it with intention, others will continue to siphon it away, sometimes unconsciously, sometimes with calculated precision, and use it to fuel their own agendas against your best interests. If everything you have read so far is striking deep chords within you, if it is awakening something long dormant, consider staying connected by subscribing, so these truths can continue. UA, reaching you. Thank you sincerely for your attention and presence here. Carl Jung refused to view the human psyche as some simplistic automatic machine that mindlessly reacts to external stimuli without deeper consequence or energetic cost. For him, the mind functioned far more like a sophisticated, living energy system, a dynamic field where every single thought you entertain, every emotion you allow to flood through you, every action you take consumes a measurable portion of that precious inner resource. The most urgent question you must now confront is this: are you the one consciously choosing where your psychic energy flows and what it nourishes? Or have you unknowingly surrendered that sacred authority to the world, to other people's moods, dramas, expectations, and manipulations? Every single time you react impulsively, without pause, without discernment, You are wasting and dissipating your psychic energy on barren, unproductive ground. When you rush to defend yourself against a petty criticism that genuinely did not deserve even a moment of your attention. When you fire back at a deliberate provocation simply to prove you are right. When you allow yourself to be pulled into endless, useless discussions that go nowhere. When you bend over backward, trying to please or placate individuals who have repeatedly demonstrated they do not value you. Each of those moments drains your inner reserves without replenishing anything meaningful. Jung was crystal clear on this principle: that which you resist persists. The harder you fight against something externally, the more tightly you bind yourself to it internally, feeding it with the very energy you wish to reclaim. People who walk through life chronically emotionally drained, perpetually exhausted, perpetually on edge, are not inherently weak or defective. Far more often they are simply misdirecting their psychic force, pouring it outward in all directions without discrimination or protection. And do you know what inevitably happens when someone lives in a state of constant inner depletion? They become profoundly vulnerable. And vulnerability, left unguarded, turns you into easy prey for those who thrive on exploiting it. The chronic manipulators, the opportunists, the emotionally parasitic individuals who can sense from a mile away that you do not yet know how to protect your own energy field, that you react to nearly everything, that you compulsively attempt to fix or soothe the entire world around you. They notice these patterns instantly, and they take full advantage. Jung taught that a truly healthy, integrated psyche is one that has learned, through practice and self-awareness, how to contain and conserve its energy within its own system, rather than leaking it everywhere. This means developing the courage to say no without drowning in guilt afterward. It means cultivating the strength to remain deliberately silent when silence is the most powerful response, without interpreting that silence as cowardice or weakness. It means training yourself to observe situations, people, and your own impulses before leaping into action or reaction. Because genuine, lasting power never lies in frantic reaction. Authentic power resides exclusively in the freedom to choose, consciously, deliberately, when, how, and with whom you will engage your energy. And that level of sovereign choice only becomes possible when you know yourself deeply enough to recognize your automatic impulses the moment they begin to arise. Think back. How many nights have you sacrificed precious sleep because of one unresolved conversation still echoing in your mind? How many hours, days, even weeks have you lost to endless mental rumination, replaying what you should have said, agonizing over why someone treated you poorly, trying desperately to decode their motives or win some imaginary argument in your head? Every one of those wasted hours represents psychic energy being drained away into nothingness, being poured into sustaining ghosts and grudges that should have been allowed to die long ago, feeding toxic relational dynamics that only continue to exist because you insist on responding to them, keeping them alive with your attention. Your psychic energy can be likened to an invisible but very real protective force field surrounding you. When it is well guarded, consciously managed, and directed with intention, that field radiates quiet authority and presence. You walk into any room and, without needing to say a single word, people instinctively register your centeredness, your solidity, your command of self. They feel compelled to respect it. But when that same energy is poorly managed, constantly leaking outward through reactivity, people-pleasing, justification, and drama engagement, you become energetically invisible, fragile, easily swayed, and the world, unfortunately, has very little mercy or patience for those who give themselves away so easily. So the practical first step is simple but profound. Begin observing your own triggers with ruthless honesty and gentle curiosity. What specific words, tones, situations, or people cause you to lose your center almost instantly? What makes the automatic reaction rise up before you can even catch your breath? Those exact points, those precise leaks, are where your energy escapes most rapidly. And those are exactly the places where your deepest inner work must now focus, not so you can become cold, numb, indifferent, or emotionally shut down, but so you can become powerfully selective, discerning, and truly sovereign over your own inner domain. And here we arrive at one of Carl Jung's most revolutionary and unsettling revelations. When you consciously begin to conserve and protect your psychic energy, instead of scattering it, you automatically start dismantling and breaking apart all the unconscious projections that other people have been placing upon you for years. And that single act, ceasing to serve as a convenient screen for their disowned material, disturbs a great many people very deeply. Because now we are stepping directly into darker, more shadowy territory, the realm of truly silent, covert manipulation that has likely been operating in your life far longer than you realized. In the next section, we will look unflinchingly at exactly how opportunistic, predatory individuals feed off your unguarded energy, and why your deliberate, conscious unavailability becomes the single most effective way to completely disarm and neutralize their entire game. Prepare yourself. You're about to look straight into the eyes of those who have drained you for years, without you ever fully seeing it. You still believe, on some level, that you are in full control of your reactions. You tell yourself that your emotional responses are conscious, deliberate choices made from a place of strength and awareness. But the darker, more uncomfortable truth is this: the vast majority of your emotional reactions are not freely chosen at all. They are deeply programmed reflexes, conditioned patterns laid down over years of repetition. And the people who understand this mechanism, whether consciously or instinctively, can manipulate you with terrifying ease and almost no effort on their part. The most skillful opportunists almost never need to shout, threaten, coerce, or create dramatic scenes to get what they want from you. They simply locate the buttons you have left exposed, the old wounds, the guilt triggers, the fear of abandonment, the need for approval, and they press them lightly, almost casually. And because the programming is so deep, you react. You always react. Every time. Carl Jung called this mechanism projection, the unconscious psychological process through which people transfer onto others the qualities, feelings, or shadows they cannot or will not acknowledge within themselves. But there is another, even more insidious layer to projection that very few people ever recognize. While others are busy projecting their unresolved material onto you, because of your chronic emotional availability, become the perfect receptacle, the blank canvas, the willing screen for all of it. You already know the patterns intimately, even if you have never named them. That one friend who only ever reaches out when they are in the middle of yet another personal crisis and needs your empathy, advice, or rescue. That partner or family member who perpetually requires you to save the day, to fix their problems. Regulate their emotions. That person who showers you with praise and affection, but only for as long as you continue being useful, compliant, energetically available to them. None of these patterns are random accidents. These people are not truly relating to you, the full, multidimensional human being. They are relating to a carefully constructed idea of you, to the convenient role you have, perhaps unconsciously, agreed to play in their life story. And the most painful question of all, why have you agreed to play that role for so long? The answer almost always traces back to fear, deep, primal fear of disappointing others, fear of not being loved or wanted, fear of abandonment, fear of being seen as selfish if you dare to prioritize yourself. The most devastating and effective form of manipulation almost never involves loud voices or overt threats. It operates in the quiet, insidious silence of guilt. It whispers to you that you owe something to the other person simply because they exist, because they expressed a need, because they once did something kind for you. It convinces you that you must be available, must help, must understand, must respond, even when honoring that demand slowly destroys your inner peace and vitality. And here is the central game-changing insight. The true manipulator does not actually need to control every aspect of your behavior. They only need you to keep reacting in the same predictable ways you always have. Consistency is their power. But the moment you interrupt that consistency, when you stop reacting on cue, when you begin saying no without elaborate apologies, when you respond to provocation with silence instead of explanation, you withdraw your energy instead of pouring it out, the entire manipulative mechanism fractures and begins to crumble. The projections they placed on you lose their anchor. The comfortable role they assigned you suddenly no longer fits. They become disoriented, confused, even panicked, because they no longer know quite who you are or how to predict your behavior. And far worse for them, they are now forced, often for the first time, to turn their gaze inward and confront their own emptiness, their own neediness, their own shadows. Not everyone is emotionally or psychologically prepared to survive that confrontation. Your conscious unavailability becomes, in their eyes, a profound threat, not because you are cruel or rejecting, but because your refusal to engage on the old terms forces them to face the void inside themselves that they have long used you to avoid. The silence you now offer becomes a mirror, held up to their internal noise, their suppressed chaos, and they hate what they see reflected back. Then comes the inevitable backlash, the accusations, the criticism, the emotional theatrics, the attempts to guilt you back into line. None of it happens because you are objectively wrong. It happens purely because you stopped serving as their convenient, always available emotional mirror. Jung expressed it with piercing accuracy. We do not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. When you withdraw your participation from the old toxic cycle, when you refuse to feed it any longer with your reactions or energy, the other person's shadow, their unacknowledged darkness, begins to rise to the surface. And for many, that emergence is psyche, unbearable. They have spent years using you as their primary escape from facing themselves. Now that escape route is closed. But what about you? Are you truly prepared to face the discomfort that inevitably accompanies this shift? Are you ready to be misunderstood, perhaps even rejected or attacked, simply for daring to protect your own energy and peace? Are you willing to endure the heavy silence that follows the rupture of old patterns? The silence where no one is chasing you, no one is demanding, no one is filling the space with noise, because it is precisely in that uncomfortable, empty silence that an entirely new kind of power begins to be born within you, a power that cannot be given or taken by anyone else. And that is exactly what we will turn our attention to next. In the noisy, frantic modern world we all inhabit, everyone seems desperate to be heard, to respond instantly, to win every pointless debate, to prove their point at all costs, even when the price is the complete sacrifice of their own inner tranquility and well-being. Yet there exists a form of power that very few people ever discover, and even fewer learn to master fully: the immense, transformative power of silence. I am not speaking here of passive, fearful silence, or the silence of defeat and cowardice. I am speaking of conscious, strategic, brutally lucid silence, the kind of silence that is not mere absence of sound, but rather an amplified, intensified form of presence. Carl Jung viewed silence not as an empty void or a lack, but as rich, fertile ground where genuine inner transformation and rebirth can take root and flourish, the instant you stop reacting automatically to every external stimuli. Something profound begins. You start to truly observe, and through sustained, non-reactive observation, you become capable of seeing patterns that were previously invisible to you. Repetitive emotional loops, subtle manipulation games, self-sabotaging cycles you had been blindly participating in for years. Silence creates space for lucidity, and lucidity, clear, unflinching seeing, is extraordinarily dangerous to anyone whose sense of control depends upon keeping you emotionally off balance and reactive. Have you ever noticed how quickly and dramatically some people begin to panic the moment you choose not to respond? When you refuse to explain yourself in detail, when you simply disappear from their radar without apology or announcement, their anxiety is rarely because they genuinely miss your presence or care about your well-being. It is almost always because your silence has suddenly stripped away their narrative control over the situation. As long as you keep speaking, explaining, justifying, defending, you remain firmly inside their game, playing by rules they understand. But the moment you go silent, you change the entire rulebook, and that sudden shift unbalances anyone who has long depended upon your predictable reactivity to maintain their own emotional equilibrium or sense of power. True silence is never the absence of voice or strength. It is instead complete mastery over your own energy field. It is the deliberate refusal to allow yourself to be dragged down into someone else's emotional storms and chaos. It is the conscious, empowered choice to refrain from engaging in battles, dramas, and conflicts that are utterly unworthy of your finite life force. Jung linked this capacity directly to the process of individuation, the journey toward becoming who you most authentically are, Because only in chosen silence can you finally begin to hear your own inner voice clearly, without the constant interference and distortion of the world's demands, opinions, projections, and noise. But do not deceive yourself. This kind of silence carries a real price, especially at first. It will inevitably distance you from people who only ever valued you for the convenient role you played in their life, not for your true depth or essence. It will render you temporarily incomprehensible, even alien, to those who have always viewed you exclusively through the lens of their own projections and needs. It will prompt labels, cold, distant, arrogant, selfish, from those who never had any real interest in your inner world, only in your utility to theirs. All of those reactions are simply proof of how deeply they depended upon your old availability to avoid facing themselves. And here is the hard, mature truth. The further you progress along the path of genuine self-development, the more selective and sparing you naturally become with your words, your energy, your emotional openness, because you come to understand through direct experience that every sentence you speak, every piece of yourself you offer, represents a significant energetic investment. And not everyone, not every situation, not every relationship deserves access to your truth, your vulnerability, your presence. Sometimes the most powerful statement you can make is no statement at all. Sometimes silence is not retreat or avoidance. It is pure sovereignty. It becomes the native language of those who have outgrown the desperate need to prove anything to anyone. Silence feels uncomfortable, even threatening, to most people because it forces them, for once, to sit alone with their own thoughts, their own internal noise, their own unprocessed emotions without the distraction or relief that your reactivity used to provide. Your absence, your refusal to fill the space, speaks louder and more truthfully than any argument or explanation ever could. And those who feel most threatened, most destabilized by your silence, inevitably reveal exactly how heavily they depended upon your previous imbalance and availability in order to maintain the illusion of their own control and stability. Yet the most profound and beautiful aspect of silence is not the way it disturbs others. The true miracle lies in what it does for you internally. This silence, this chosen, conscious withdrawal, becomes the sacred space where you finally begin to reconstruct yourself from the inside out. It reconnects you to something far greater and more enduring than fleeting external approval or validation. In this reclaimed inner territory, free at last from the relentless demands and projections of others, your vital energy begins to regenerate. Your sense of essence, of authentic self, begins to resurface and strengthen. And that inner reconnection is precisely what we will explore more deeply in the next part, because simply cutting out the external noise and chaos is only the beginning. The real mastery lies in relearning how to direct and use your energy with full consciousness, choosing precisely where it flows, where it remains protected, and, most crucially, where it must never again be wasted. It is time, high time, to become fiercely selective with your own soul. If you are currently in the active process of reclaiming your scattered energy, establishing real boundaries, and stepping into sovereignty, you will discover tremendous practical value in my book Beyond the Shadow. It takes the most essential ideas from Carl Jung's work and translates them into clear, actionable tools you can use every day to protect your psychic energy, enforce healthy limits without guilt, and gradually reconnect with the truth of who you really are at your core. You can find the link in the comments or pinned section. Understanding all of these concepts intellectually is valuable, but it means almost nothing if in your actual daily practice you continue saying yes when your whole being means no, responding immediately to messages that leave you feeling drained, participating in empty, repetitive conversations that go nowhere, and maintaining relationships that survive only out of sheer inertia, habit, or fear of loneliness. Awareness without corresponding action is merely another sophisticated layer of self-deception. Genuine, lasting transformation only ignites when you make a firm, non-negotiable decision to become selective with your presence, your energy, your time, your words. And that selectivity demands real emotional discipline and courage. Conscious unavailability is never about cultivating coldness, arrogance, cruelty, or heartless indifference toward others. It is about something far healthier and more balanced. It is about no longer remaining open and accessible to anyone, at any time, for any reason that does not align with your peace and integrity. It is about finally taking back full control of your own energy field, your schedule, your emotional bandwidth, your inner calm. The process begins with seemingly small but profoundly symbolic actions, not responding to messages the instant they arrive, giving yourself permission to wait until you are truly ready, taking a full conscious breath before allowing any reaction to escape your lips, walking away from discussions or situations the moment you sense they are about to pull you into unnecessary chaos or drama, turning off your phone, closing your door, creating space without a shred of guilt, saying not today, saying I'm not interested, saying I choose not to get involved, calmly, clearly, finally. But here is the single most liberating, and for many, most unforgivable aspect of all this: you do not owe anyone an elaborate justification for your absence. You do not need to provide a detailed explanation for your silence. You do not owe the world, or any individual in it, a full accounting of why you are choosing yourself. You owe fidelity, loyalty, and care first and foremost to your own being. And for the people who have grown accustomed to your constant availability, this refusal to explain, this unwillingness to be pulled back into old narratives, feels utterly unforgivable, because it strips away their long-held power to keep you trapped inside an emotional script where you are forever the helpful one, the understanding one, the endlessly accessible one. Carl Jung understood better than most that every authentic process of individuation necessarily passes through a period of isolation, not the depressive, despairing isolation of abandonment, but a sacred, intentional isolation, a deliberate inner retreat, where you relearn how to listen deeply to your own voice and guidance, without the endless static and interference of the collective, the crowd, the expectations of others. In that sacred solitude, you rebuild your identity, not based on how others see you, not shaped by their projections or needs, but anchored firmly in your own indestructible center. If you want a reliable thermometer for measuring your real progress along this path, simply observe, without judgment, who begins to pull away from you the moment you become more reserved and selective with your energy. Notice who grows agitated and tries to provoke you the instant you stop reacting on cue. Pay close attention to who accuses you of having changed, of becoming different, of not being the same person anymore precisely when you finally start protecting your peace and sovereignty. Those reactions are not evidence that you are doing something wrong. They are clear, unmistakable proof that you have begun, truly begun, to free yourself from old patterns and dependencies. Conscious unavailability will feel deeply uncomfortable at first. Waves of guilt will rise up and try to convince you that you are being selfish, unkind, heartless. You may hear accusations from others, or from your own inner critic, that you are being too harsh, too closed off, too extreme. But all of that discomfort is an entirely natural part of the deconstruction process. You have spent your entire life being systematically conditioned to place yourself second, to prioritize everyone else's comfort over your own. Of course, the reversal creates friction. Of course, it causes temporary pain, not only in you, but in everyone who benefited from your old, over-giving version of yourself. Conscious unavailability is nothing less than the bedrock foundation of genuine self-determination and inner freedom. Every time you say no to the world's endless demands, you are simultaneously saying a powerful, life-affirming yes to yourself. Every time you withdraw from toxic environments, draining dynamics, or one-sided relationships, you are reaffirming, loudly and clearly, that your peace, your energy, your wholeness is worth infinitely more than any false connection, any illusion of belonging, any temporary approval. And every time you stop explaining yourself, stop justifying your choices, stop defending your right to exist on your own terms, you begin, slowly but surely, to earn real respect, even if that respect comes from fewer people than before. Yet not everyone will welcome or celebrate this emerging version of you. Your emotional absence, your refusal to play the old roles, will inevitably expose wounds, insecurities, and dependencies in others that they have spent years refusing to face. And when those wounds are touched, rupture almost always follows: pain, loneliness, estrangement, the aching feeling that you are somehow losing people or connections. But here is the liberating truth you must hold on to. You are not losing anything real. You are simply releasing what was never truly yours to begin with. You are freeing yourself from illusions disguised as relationships. But what happens after the rupture? What emerges on the other side of the silence and the solitude? What is born from the courage to be temporarily misunderstood, temporarily alone, temporarily outside the familiar circle? In the final section, we will explore precisely that, the profound rebirth that becomes possible only when you have the strength to walk through misunderstanding, to embrace solitude as a teacher, and to become whole, truly whole, within yourself. When you finally stop being endlessly available to everyone who asks, something deep, almost alchemical, begins to unfold within you. At first, there is only silence, an uncomfortable, sometimes deafening inner silence that feels as though it is screaming at you from the inside. Doubts flood in. Did I make the right choice? Am I being too extreme, too harsh, too unforgiving? Am I losing people who actually cared about me? Will I end up completely alone? But if you can stay with that silence, without running back to fill it with old habits, old reactions, old explanations, something remarkable starts to happen. Gradually, almost imperceptibly at first, the silence stops feeling like punishment. It begins to purify. It begins to calm the storm inside. It begins to heal wounds you did not even realize were still bleeding. And then, slowly, gently, solitude arrives. But this is not the desolate solitude of abandonment or rejection. This is the rich, nourishing solitude of total, uncompromised presence with your own being. This is the solitude of the strong, the solitude of someone who refuses any longer to betray themselves, diminish themselves, abandon themselves just to keep others close, just to avoid the temporary pain of being alone. In the spacious inner territory cleared by that conscious solitude, something extraordinary enters to take the place of what was lost. Where confusion and mental noise once reigned, crystal clarity begins to dawn. Where anxiety and reactivity once dominated, a deep, unshakable peace settles in. Where neediness, people-pleasing, and external validation once ruled, an entirely new kind of strength emerges. The quiet-rooted strength of being whole within yourself, of no longer needing to borrow completeness from anyone else. Carl Jung taught that the process of individuation, the journey of becoming who you most truly and essentially are, absolutely requires a period of distancing from the collective, a temporary disidentification from the persona mask, a willingness to walk alone for a while so that your authentic self can finally emerge without distortion. And that is exactly what you are enacting every time you choose unavailability over constant accessibility. You are not fleeing from the world in fear or bitterness. You are courageously returning home, to yourself. It is at this precise turning point that you stop functioning merely as a reactor, someone shaped and tossed by external circumstances, and begin stepping fully into the role of creator, someone who shapes their reality from a deep inner center of truth, intention, and sovereignty. The people who feel most uncomfortable, most threatened, most destabilized by your absence are the very ones who reveal. They never truly wanted you, the real you. They wanted the role you played, the emotional function you served, the energetic supply you provided. Now that you no longer fit neatly into their script, they are left bewildered, unsure what to do with this new version of you. And that realization, painful as it may be at first, is profoundly liberating. You may lose people, yes, but in their place you begin to find yourself. We all may distance yourself from certain places, circles, habits, but in doing so, you reconnect with your own essence in ways you may never have experienced before. You may be misunderstood, judged, labeled for a time, but finally, at long last, you begin to be respected on a level that actually matters, respected for your integrity, your boundaries, your self-possession. Because when you are no longer available for just anything, for emotional scraps, for mind games, for connections that feel like voids disguised as affection, you become something rare and valuable in the truest sense. You become unforgettable, irreplaceable, sovereign. This is not an ending. This is a powerful rebirth. This is the beginning of a completely different kind of life. One where you accept only what genuinely resonates with your hard-won peace. your authentic truth, your emerging wholeness. And if you have read this far, if you have stayed with these words through every layer, every discomfort, every challenge, then a part of you is already ready. A deep part of you already understands that being loved, being wanted, being included means absolutely nothing if the price is abandoning your own soul in the process. And true self-love, the kind that endures, begins the moment you make the courageous choice to choose yourself, even when that choice means walking through a season of solitude, misunderstanding, or solitude. Now I ask you directly, right here in the comments, with complete honesty, are you ready to be misunderstood, perhaps rejected, perhaps even hated by some, all in the name of claiming your inner freedom and sovereignty? Are you willing to pay the real price of finally becoming yourself? No apologies, no explanations, no compromises. If this message has touched something profound within you, if it has awakened a yes in your deepest being, write these words in the comments right now. I choose my peace. Let's see together how many souls here are truly ready to make this transition, to step across this threshold. And whatever you do, stay tuned. The next piece in this series holds even greater depth and revelation than this one. It is more important than you might imagine right now. I will see you there.